I opened the door to my personal sanctuary and stopped short. Two gentlemen, their overalls smeared with paint, were diligently applying a thick coat to my walls, previously a soft peach hue. My patterned drapes were discarded in a crumpled pile on the floor. My dresser had been inexplicably relocated to the center of the room, adorned with cans of dripping paint resting precariously on its gleaming surface, a surface I had painstakingly restored myself. Leaning casually against the doorframe, arms crossed and a wide grin splitting his face as if he'd just delivered the punchline to the world's best joke, was Manny, my 35-year-old son. Beside him, Lauren, my daughter-in-law, was engrossed in her phone, sporting that self-satisfied smirk she wore when she emerged victorious. The painter's brush, suspended mid-air, froze as they registered my presence. The younger of the two painters looked at me with an expression of unease, as though I had stumbled upon a private moment. The pungent aroma of fresh paint assaulted my senses, inducing a wave of dizziness that mingled with the burgeoning fury simmering within my chest. What is the meaning of this? My voice emerged considerably weaker than I had intended. I had just returned from a grueling 12-hour shift at the local diner, a place where I had dedicated 15 years to crafting meals for countless families, commemorating their milestones, all while enduring the searing heat of boiling oil against my skin. My feet ached in my well-worn shoes, and my back protested the countless hours spent hunched over the stoves. Yet none of that seemed to matter in this moment. Lauren finally looked up from her device, bestowing upon me that saccharine smile she reserved for moments when she desired something. "Oh, Mama, you're home earlier than expected. We're simply making a few adjustments before we move in." Her tone was disarmingly casual, as if she were remarking on the passing weather. Manny straightened, advancing towards me with that characteristic swagger that had always managed to unnerve me. "Mum, we wanted to surprise you. You know, this room is far too expansive for just you, and frankly, we require more space. The children are growing, and our apartment has become quite constricting." My legs began to tremble. 20 years spent toiling in that arduous kitchen, diligently saving every single cent that would eventually afford me this very house. 20 years of inhaling the acrid scent of grill smoke, enduring the tirades of disgruntled patrons, and scrubbing away stubborn grease until the late hours, all for the singular purpose of possessing a haven that was unequivocally mine, a place where I could find respite without the need for anyone's permission. The older painter cleared his throat, an audible sign of discomfort. "Mom, if there's an issue, we can halt operations and return tomorrow." No, please continue," Lauren interjected, waving a dismissive hand as if she held dominion over the premises. "We've already settled the payment. Might as well see it through today." Paid? With what funds? I posed the question internally, yet the answer was already painfully evident. The money I had graciously loaned them the previous month, when Manny had lost his employment at the manufacturing plant. The funds I had withdrawn from my meagre savings at the tearful insistence of my daughter-in-law, who had implored me to assist them with their rent. Manny drew nearer, placing a hand on my shoulder with an assumed familiarity that no longer offered any solace. "Mum, try not to get upset. It's just paint. Besides, we've already consulted with an architect. We can partition the house into 2 distinct sections. You'll have your own area and we'll have ours, like one big happy family." One big happy family. The phrase echoed hollowly like a phantom sound in an abandoned space. My gaze fell upon the crumpled curtains strewn across the floor, the very ones I had meticulously sewn myself, using fabric I had procured from the market after 3 arduous weeks of diligently saving my tips. My eyes then settled on the growing paint stain marring my dresser. a piece I had discovered at a garage sale and painstakingly sanded and varnished over 2 entire weekends. "And who exactly made this decision?" I inquired, my voice regaining a measure of its former strength. "When did you both convene and chart the course for my home's future without so much as a consultation with me?" Lauren let out a dramatic sigh and finally pocketed her phone. "Mama, don't be so melodramatic. You always become so difficult whenever we attempt to do something thoughtful. Look at this rather unappealing color you had. The white is going to look absolutely stunning. You'll see." "Stunning for whom?" I yearned to exclaim. I had deliberately chosen that particular shade of peach. It had been the result of days spent comparing countless samples at the paint store. It conjured images of the vibrant sunsets I used to observe from the window of my former rented accommodation, a time when I harbored the ardent aspiration of owning walls that I could adorn with any color I desired. The painters continued their work, feigning ignorance of our escalating dispute, yet I was acutely aware of their discreet, uncomfortable glances whenever our voices rose. The younger artisan sported paint splatters even in his hair, prompting me to ponder the remuneration for this last-minute endeavor. Manny ambled around the room with the air of an inspector surveying his newly acquired property. "Mum, observe, it's going to be considerably more radiant, and once we bring in our furnishings, you'll truly grasp the profound transformation." Lauren had already identified a splendid bedroom ensemble on sale, their belongings occupying my space, the very area I had populated, with items that held personal significance, each imbued with its own narrative, each purchased with the sweat of my brow, hands now wrinkled from the harsh detergents of the commercial kitchen. Lauren approached the vanity where I kept my inexpensive fragrances and my hand creams. "Oh, and all this clutter we can organize more effectively. You really don't require so many possessions, Mama. As you age, one must begin to simplify their existence. Simplify my existence, as if my cherished mementos were mere detritus, encroaching upon their grand designs, as if my 67 years had somehow rendered me an unwelcome tenant in my own abode." A profound sense of something breaking within me washed over me. It wasn't merely the fresh paint encroaching upon my beloved walls, nor the furniture rearranged without my consent. It was the chilling realization that my future had been casually decided by them, as if I were an outdated piece of furniture destined for the least conspicuous corner. And with that, everything began to unravel. But allow me to recount the events that led me to this precipice, so you might comprehend my current predicament. That afternoon, observing strangers transform my sanctuary, I understood with absolute clarity that the time had come to assert my boundaries, even at the risk of losing the only familial ties I possessed. My name is Fatima Jones, and I am 67 years of age. For the past 15 years, I have been employed in the kitchen of the local diner, a popular establishment where families gather to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and graduations. Behind the scenes, I labor diligently over the stoves, preparing their cherished dishes. My day begins at 5 in the morning, commencing with the preparation of the chicken stock that simmers for hours. I depart at 7 in the evening, my uniform saturated with grease, the scent of fried onions clinging to my hair. Prior to my tenure at the diner, I worked in 3 other culinary establishments, consistently within the confines of the kitchen, perpetually invisible to the patrons who savored my creations without ever knowing their originator. My hands bear the indelible marks of small scars, reminders of encounters with scorching pans and knives that occasionally slipped during periods of intense activity. My fingernails, once adorned with a delicate shade of pink polish, are now kept meticulously short and unvarnished, a matter of hygiene essential for food preparation. I was widowed 12 years ago. Robert succumbed to a cardiac episode while engrossed in a Sunday afternoon television program. He was a good man who dedicated his life to labouring in a furniture factory, leaving me with a wealth of cherished memories rather than a substantial financial inheritance. Following his interment, I remained in the apartment we had occupied since our union, remitting $550 monthly to a landlord who systematically increased the rent each year, offering no corresponding improvements. Manny was a different child, a quiet boy who would embrace me upon my weary return from work and assist with folding laundry while recounting his school day. However, a discernible alteration occurred subsequent to his encounter with Lauren. She entered his life like a tempest, brimming with grand ambitions and an appetite for extravagance. She spoke of sojourns to Europe, of acquiring new automobiles, and of residing in affluent enclaves frequented by the influential elite. Initially, I perceived it as beneficial for my son to have an ambitious partner. Robert had always possessed a contented disposition, finding joy in simplicity, and I harboured a concern that Manny might have inherited this same placidity, which was occasionally misconstrued as a lack of drive. Yet, I soon discovered that Lauren's aspirations came with a considerable price tag, one that others were expected to bear. Upon their wedding, I advanced them $1,000 for the festivities. This was money I had painstakingly accumulated, coin by coin, stashed away in a cookie jar. As I harboured a distrust of financial institutions, they assured me repayment within 6 months. That was 8 years ago. When their first child was born, they requested an additional $800 to cover hospital expenses. With the arrival of their second child, they required $100 to purchase a pre-owned crib and a stroller. There was invariably an emergent crisis, always accompanied by a promise of prompt reimbursement. I never pressed them for the funds. A mother does not levy interest upon her offspring, I would rationalize to myself. Yet beneath the surface I understood that my benevolent gestures had evolved into their convenient recourse. It was invariably simpler to solicit assistance from mother than to seek additional employment or curtail their extravagant lifestyle. Working in the culinary industry instills a profound sense of resilience. When the head chef admonishes you for a dish exceeding its allotted preparation time by 2 minutes, when the waitstaff assigns blame to you for a customer's complaint regarding the temperature of their soup, when your swollen feet implore respite, yet you face an additional 5 hours of your shift, you learn that no one will champion your cause if you do not first advocate for yourself. One also gains an acute appreciation for the value of money. Each dollar disbursed to me represented half an hour spent standing before a scorching grill or immersed in the task of washing immense pots, with water so hot it turned my forearms crimson. This is precisely why I meticulously saved every available resource. A few dollars from weekend gratuities when I worked overtime during holidays, $50 when the restaurant hosted a special event and we received bonuses. I subsisted on the absolute minimum: second-hand attire, simple meals prepared at home, and entertainment restricted to complimentary television programs. On Sundays, my sole day of rest, I would frequent the local flea market in search of useful and economical items. It was there that I acquired my dresser for $30, the very piece now bearing unsightly white paint stains. Following Robert's passing, solitude became my constant companion. I would return home exhausted from work, with no one awaiting me with a steaming cup of tea or inquiring about my day. Weekends often felt interminably long. Manny would visit periodically, invariably accompanied by Lauren and their children, but their sojourns felt more akin to inspections. They would scrutinize my refrigerator, comment on the cramped dimensions of the apartment, and suggest it was time for me to consider relocating to a senior living facility. A senior living facility, as if my 67 years had automatically relegated me to a state of incapacity. incapable of independent decision-making, as if dedicating 40 hours a week to the demanding environment of a commercial kitchen were the occupation of a frail or senile individual. Lauren possessed a peculiar talent for making me feel antiquated and outmoded. She would discourse on mobile applications that eluded my comprehension, trendy eateries she frequented, and influential individuals she had encountered through Manny's employment. She invariably concluded her narratives with a patronizing smile and a dismissive pat on my hand. "Oh, Mamma, what would you possibly know about these modern contraptions?" Yet I possessed knowledge that surpassed hers. I understood how to make a monthly paycheck of $1,200 suffice for an entire 30-day period. I knew how to eradicate stubborn stains from clothing and how to mend malfunctioning appliances with patience and ingenuity. I understood the art of working 12 consecutive hours without complaint and the discipline of saving money, even when it appeared an insurmountable challenge. For years, my most profound aspiration had been to own my own residence. Not an opulent or ostentatious dwelling, but simply a space where I could personally select the wall colors, arrange my few furnishings, and extend invitations to my colleagues for coffee without seeking a landlord's approval. A place that would be entirely mine, where no one could dictate rent increases or impose restrictions on my activities. This dream intensified following the new proprietor of my building's decision to renovate all the apartments. We were given a 3-month ultimatum: vacate the premises or consent to a monthly rent augmentation of $200. For me, that additional $200 represented the chasm between maintaining my dignity and meticulously counting every cent to survive until month's end. It was at this juncture that I resolved to undertake an action that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. For 30 years I had been discreetly accumulating funds, not merely the sum that Manny and Lauren were aware of, but additional resources. Funds I had amassed, coin by coin, bill by bill, concealed in locations unknown to anyone else. Beneath the mattress lay a plastic bag containing $1 bills. Tucked away within an empty coffee can at the very bottom of the closet, I stored all the supplemental gratuities from my weekend shifts. Within the hem of my Sunday best attire, the dress I reserved for significant occasions, I had meticulously sewn $500 in $50 denominations. Upon completing my tally, I had amassed $3,800, a considerable fortune for an individual earning $200 per week. Each bill represented a narrative of personal sacrifice. The day I resolved to embark on the search for a dwelling was a Tuesday morning. I had awakened with an unusual sense of resolve, as though an inner dormant spirit had been awakened after years of slumber. I donned my most presentable attire, recounted my funds one final time, and ventured out to explore neighborhoods where properties fell within my financial reach. The initial residence I surveyed was situated in a tranquil district, a 40-minute bus journey from the diner. It was a modest dwelling comprising 2 bedrooms, a single bathroom, a diminutive kitchen, and a rear garden approximately the size of a dining table. The exterior paint was deteriorating, the windows necessitated repair, and the front lawn was predominantly an expanse of weeds, yet it possessed an element that immediately captivated me. A substantial window in the master bedroom offered an eastward orientation, an ideal vantage point for observing the sunrise. The real estate agent, a young man clad in an expensive suit and exuding a practiced salesmanship smile, appraised me with a discernible condescension when I expressed my interest. "Ma'am, this property is valued at $35,000. Have you secured mortgage pre-approval?" "I do not require a loan," I replied calmly. "I can provide payment in cash." His demeanor underwent an immediate and palpable transformation. Suddenly I was no longer an elderly woman perceived as a waste of his valuable time, but rather a client of serious intent. He proceeded to escort me through every nook and cranny of the house, eloquently expounding upon the merits of each individual space as if it were a palatial estate. The kitchen offers ample room for a small dining arrangement. The bathroom underwent renovation 5 years ago. The electrical system is in satisfactory condition. However, my decision had been firmly cemented from the moment I first beheld that particular window. For years, I had awakened in dimly lit rooms within apartments where sunlight struggled to penetrate the looming shadows of adjacent structures. Here I could savor my morning coffee while witnessing the dawn of a new day. I could adorn the windowsills with vibrant flora. I could experience a sense of aliveness rather than mere functionality. That very afternoon, I submitted an offer of $30,000. The seller readily accepted. According to the agent's account, they had been endeavoring to divest themselves of the property for a period of 8 months without success. The neighborhood was deemed insufficiently fashionable for affluent purchasers, yet not economically accessible enough for individuals with limited savings. It was, in essence, a perfect fit for someone in my circumstances. The legal formalities extended over a period of 3 weeks. Throughout this interval, I maintained absolute silence, divulging my plans to no one. Not Manny, not Lauren, not even Joanna, my colleague, who was the closest approximation of a confidant I possessed. Each evening upon returning from my shift at the diner, I would sit and envision the reality of inhabiting my own home. I would contemplate the colours with which I would adorn the walls, the precise placement of my limited collection of furnishings, and the optimal arrangement of the kitchen to facilitate culinary endeavours, tailored solely for my personal enjoyment. On the day the final documentation was executed, my hands trembled, not from apprehension, but from an overwhelming surge of exhilaration. At the age of 65, for the very first time in my existence, I was on the verge of possessing something that was entirely and unequivocally mine, something that could not be expropriated, where rent increases were an impossibility and dictates regarding my personal conduct were non-existent. Upon receiving the keys, I paused before the entryway for several minutes before initiating my ingress. Once I crossed that threshold, I would no longer be the Fatima who had spent her entire life adapting to the spaces designated by others. I would be Fatima, the homeowner. Fatima, the proprietor of her own dwelling. Fatima, who had achieved a feat that many individuals with superior professional standing and advanced educational backgrounds had failed to accomplish. The house was vacant and carried the faint scent of dampness. Nevertheless, it was mine. I traversed each room deliberately, my fingertips tracing the surfaces of the walls, testing the functionality of the light switches, and opening and closing the windows. In the master bedroom, I stood before the window that had so profoundly captivated me and offered a smile, the first genuine smile I had experienced in many months. That night, I slept on the floor of my new residence, cocooned in a blanket transported from my former rented apartment. I was devoid of furniture, yet I possessed something far more valuable. I held the unwavering certainty that every single inch of that dwelling belonged to me. The ensuing complications arose when I elected to inform Manny and Lauren of my acquisition. I extended an invitation for dinner the subsequent Sunday. I prepared their favourite dish, chicken mole, a culinary undertaking that demanded 3 hours of dedicated effort, and meticulously set the table with my most esteemed dinnerware. My intention was to orchestrate a celebration, a special occasion wherein I would share my triumph with the sole individuals I considered family. Manny arrived in a decidedly somber mood. He had been terminated from his position at the manufacturing plant the preceding week due to repeated tardiness, and he expressed considerable frustration regarding his unsuccessful job interviews. Lauren's arrival was punctuated by a litany of complaints concerning the traffic congestion, the oppressive heat, and the exceptionally trying behavior of the children throughout the week. I deferred the revelation of my news until after the dessert course. I have something significant to impart to you, I announced, endeavoring to maintain a tone of casual excitement. Lauren emitted a sigh. Oh, Mama, I do hope you're not about to embark on an emotional monologue. We are already grappling with a substantial number of our own difficulties. No, it is not of that nature. It is, in fact, something exceptionally positive. I have purchased a house. The ensuing silence was so profound it could be physically perceived. Manny halted his fork, poised midway to his mouth. Lauren regarded me as if I had declared my intention to wed an extraterrestrial being. You acquired a house? Manny inquired, his voice laced with incredulence. A modest dwelling situated in the St. Vincent neighborhood, 2 bedrooms, a garden. It is precisely suited for my needs. Lauren abruptly straightened in her chair. With what funds? From where did you procure $30,000? I had been diligently saving for many years, I elucidated. Funds derived from my employment, gratuities, and modest sums I consistently set aside. Lauren's expression transmuted from astonishment to an emotion that I could not immediately categorize. It appeared to be a disconcerting amalgamation of anger and profound disappointment, as though my newfound independence constituted a personal act of betrayal against her. Mum, why did you not confide in us? Manny inquired, his tone tinged with bewilderment. We could have assisted you in locating a more suitable property, a residence situated closer to the city, a more secure environment. I did not require assistance. I had already discovered precisely what I desired. Lauren abruptly rose from the table. This is utterly unbelievable. We are struggling to meet our rent obligations, borrowing funds for the children's expenses, and you have been hoarding thousands of dollars this entire time. They were not hoarded, they were saved. It amounts to the same thing, Lauren exclaimed, her voice escalating. Do you have any conception of how many times we have been in desperate need of funds? How often we have been compelled to borrow meager sums from you when you possessed a veritable fortune secreted away? Manny attempted to placate her, but I detected in his gaze a reflection of her sentiments. In their perception, my financial resources had perpetually served as a readily accessible reservoir for their emergent exigencies. The notion that I harbored personal objectives, individual aspirations, had evidently never materialized within the scope of their contemplation. Furthermore, Lauren continued, her voice regaining a semblance of control, you are no longer of an age where living alone is prudent. What recourse will exist if you fall ill, if you sustain an injury and there is no one to render assistance? I am perfectly capable of managing on my own, I responded resolutely. I engage in gainful employment for 8 hours daily. I attend to all my personal affairs. I do not require constant supervision. However, Lauren had already formulated her definitive argument. The insidious seed she planted that evening would ultimately blossom into the justification for all subsequent machinations. Mama, at your age, pragmatism is paramount. It would be considerably more advantageous if you were to liquidate that property and join us. We could utilize the proceeds to acquire a more spacious residence where we could all comfortably reside. There it was. A mere 10 minutes had elapsed since they became privy to my accomplishment, and they were already strategizing on how to capitalize upon it. The arduous process of relocating to my new abode spanned 3 full weekends. Lacking the financial means to engage professional movers, I was compelled to transport my possessions incrementally via public bus. With each journey, I carried 2 large duffel bags filled with clothing, books, and the modest keepsakes I had accumulated throughout the years. The bus operators had become acquainted with me by then, and some would even offer assistance in lifting the heavier receptacles. The most formidable challenge involved the relocation of my compact refrigerator and my washing machine. For this undertaking, I enlisted the aid of Joe, Joanna's brother, who possessed an aging yet functional pickup truck. I compensated him $50 for his endeavour, funds he arguably required more urgently than I, but it signified my hard-won independence. The sight of my appliances gracing my own kitchen was worth every penny. The initial months spent in my new house were arguably the happiest period of my life. I would awaken each morning to the gentle intrusion of sunlight streaming through my beloved window. Before I even stirred from my slumber, I'd linger for a few moments, savouring a profound silence that was entirely my own. No squabbling neighbours beyond flimsy partitions, no heavy tread from the floor above, not a hint of loud melodies at the witching hour. When my workday concluded, I no longer returned to an abode that reeked of others' culinary endeavours. Instead, I would step into a dwelling that carried the comforting aroma of scented candles, a small indulgence I'd occasionally bestow upon myself. In the front garden, I'd coaxed life from the soil, planting vibrant purple petunias and delicate white daisies, acquisitions made during a special sale at the neighbourhood garden centre. My horticultural expertise was nascent, learned mostly through instructional videos viewed on Sundays at the local public library. The kitchen, though modest in size, was my sanctuary. It was a marvel of organisation, meticulously arranged to suit my every requirement. Each cooking vessel found its designated spot, every blade precisely where I needed it. After enduring years of clamour within bustling commercial kitchens, the luxury of a tranquil, orderly space for preparing my own meals was an unparalleled delight. On my days off, I dedicated my spare earnings to enhancing the house. With paint procured at a discount, I transformed the living room into a soft yellow hue reminiscent of my grandmother's kitchen. The bathroom received a coat of mint green, a shade I'd spied in a magazine carelessly left behind at the restaurant. Each gallon of paint, priced at $12, imbued every room with a revitalized atmosphere. My knowledge of home repairs expanded through online tutorials accessed at the library. When the sink faucet faltered, rather than summoning a plumber at a potential $100 charge, I acquired the necessary components for $15 and mended it myself. A recalcitrant window refusing to close smoothly was remedied by carefully sanding its swollen wood until it operated flawlessly. Manny and Lauren graced my presence twice within those initial months. Both occasions were tinged with a critical undercurrent that diminished my nascent joy. The first visit, a mere 3 weeks after my move, occurred unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon as I was tending to newly planted red geraniums in the yard. "Mom, this area feels a bit run down," was Manny's initial pronouncement upon exiting his vehicle. "You see houses with dilapidated fences and yards overgrown with weeds." Lauren conducted a perfunctory tour, her expression one of distaste, her fingers brushing against the freshly painted walls as if they were fragile cardboard. "This kitchen is remarkably small. Where will you accommodate guests? And this bathroom is crying out for a complete overhaul. The tiling looks ancient." I, however, cherished my bathroom. The 70s era tiling, while dated, was in pristine condition and gleamed from my diligent cleaning. The towels, a bargain purchase, harmonized exquisitely with the green of the walls. The subsequent visit proved even more trying. They arrived amidst a downpour, only to discover a minor seepage from the guest bedroom ceiling. Rather than offering assistance, Lauren seized the opportunity to compile a litany of perceived flaws. "Look at this, Mum. This house is disintegrating. Observe this water stain. It will only worsen, leading to rot in the wood. And these outdated windows offer virtually no insulation. Your heating bills will be exorbitant this winter." Manny chimed in, his criticism cloaked in feigned concern for my safety. Mum, this neighbourhood doesn't seem secure for an elderly woman living alone. The house on the corner has broken windows, and several streets are littered with abandoned vehicles. What would you do in the event of a burglary? Those are concerns I might entertain anywhere, I countered. Here at least I possess my own space. Yet their pronouncements sowed seeds of doubt, sprouting with every unfamiliar nighttime sound, every visible yard cluttered with refuse, and every subsequent repair. The ongoing maintenance costs, though substantial, remained manageable. $20 for a pipe developing a drip, $5 for materials to seal a roof leak, and $40 for an electrician to inspect a sparking outlet. Each expenditure stung not from financial strain, but from the erosion of diligently accumulated savings. Nevertheless, for every dollar invested in upkeep, a greater sum was preserved by eliminating rent. My monthly expenditures plummeted from $850 for rent and utilities in the apartment to just $450 for utilities and maintenance alone. That surplus of $400 each month provided a sense of security previously unknown. With this newfound financial breathing room, I acquired items I had long considered unattainable luxuries. A new television replaced Robert's aging model, its screen marred by scratches. A set of superior quality sheets, impervious to fraying after mere washes. A compact coffee maker, ensuring the luxury of freshly brewed coffee each morning, a far cry from the instant variety. I also began hosting Joanna for Sunday lunches. A fellow widow, she resided in a modest apartment with her elder sister and keenly appreciated a quiet space for unhindered conversation. We'd prepare meals together, discuss our professions, our physical ailments, and our favourite television programs. This marked the first genuine friendship I'd experienced in years, transcending mere workplace collegiality. Joanna helped me identify the underlying issue of Manny and Lauren's behaviour, labelling it as financial abuse. "Oh, Fatima," she confided one Sunday as we dried dishes, "your children view you as a walking piggy bank. Each time they require funds, they feel entitled to shatter the glass and take what they desire." Her words struck a chord, resonating with an uncomfortable truth. For years, I had rationalized their persistent requests for money as valid necessities. The children required clothing. Their vehicles had broken down. They faced unforeseen medical expenses. However, with physical distance now established, the pattern became glaringly apparent. The borrowed sums were never repaid. I was never invited out to reciprocate their shared meals. My birthdays and Mother's Day went unmarked by gifts. Yet their own birthdays and the Christmas season demanded my generosity. A more disquieting observation emerged. Their visits grew increasingly frequent, each punctuated by heightened criticism of my home and my choice to live independently. Lauren began making veiled remarks about my age and my capacity for self-sufficiency. "Mum, yesterday, my friend Rose mentioned her mother fell in her home and lay on the floor for 3 hours before being discovered. What would your course of action be if such an event befell you?" Rose, Lauren's neighbour, was 85 years old and suffered from balance issues. I, at 67, spent 8 hours daily on my feet in a commercial kitchen. The comparison was ludicrous, yet Lauren reiterated it with each visit. Manny, in turn, escalated his suggestions toward outright selling the house. "Mum, I've been contemplating this, and if you were to sell now, you could easily realize $40,000. Property values have appreciated considerably since your purchase. With that capital, we could acquire a more spacious residence where we could all reside comfortably." The emphasis on all implied my comfort was a secondary consideration. However, the true pressure mounted when Manny lost his second position within a 6-month span. 8 months into my residency in my new home, I decided to host a small gathering to showcase my achievements to friends and family. It was not an elaborate affair, merely a Sunday luncheon for the most significant individuals in my life. I extended invitations to Joanna and her sister Lillian, Vincent the electrician who had become a valued friend through his repair work, Manny and Lauren with their children, and Tatiana, my cousin, who resided across town and had yet to see my abode. I dedicated 2 weeks to preparations, meticulously cleaning every surface until it gleamed. I adorned the front yard with fresh blossoms, and even had a minor crack in the exterior wall, a persistent eyesore since my arrival, professionally repaired. My desire was for everything to present an immaculate appearance. The menu was curated with the same meticulousness I applied to large banquets at the restaurant. Red mole with chicken prepared the preceding Saturday. Rice and beans simmered for hours on a low heat, and freshly made tortillas prepared that very morning. For dessert, my specialty, tres leches cake. The ingredient cost amounted to $10, exceeding my typical 2-week food budget, but the occasion warranted the expense. The table was set with white tablecloths acquired at a bargain, plates that, while not a matched set, coordinated harmoniously, and a vase brimming with fresh blooms from my garden, a find from a garage sale. It lacked the ostentatious elegance of the tables Lauren documented from upscale establishments frequented by her companions. However, it possessed an intrinsic quality absent in those settings. It was unequivocally mine. Joanna and Lillian arrived first, bearing a tray of delectable empanadas they had prepared as their contribution. Vincent arrived with a bottle of reasonably priced yet palatable wine and a small bag containing several pots of fragrant herbs for my garden. Tatiana arrived with a significant delay, but her warm smile and extended embrace conveyed her delight. "Oh, cousin, this house is exquisite," Tatiana exclaimed, her gaze sweeping across the rooms, appreciating each detail. "I find it hard to believe it's yours. Do you recall our childhood games of playing house beneath Grandma's table? You always declared that upon reaching adulthood, you would possess a home surrounded by a garden bursting with flowers." Indeed, I remembered. It had been my aspiration since the tender age of 8, when I assisted my grandmother with her plants, and she promised I would one day cultivate my own garden. Nearly 60 years had elapsed, yet my dream had finally materialized. The repast was perfection. The mole struck an exquisite balance of spice and sweetness, a flavor profile I had spent years refining. The rice was light and flavorful. The tortillas, served warm, were exquisitely soft. My guests partook with the genuine appreciation of those who savored home-cooked fare, not out of obligation, but from sheer delight. Vincent offered a compliment on my culinary prowess. "Fatima, this mole surpasses my mother's, and that's high praise indeed. I remain mystified as to your methods, but each time I taste your cooking, I am reminded of why I chose the path of an electrician over that of a chef." Joanna raised her glass of iced tea for a toast. "To Fatima, who demonstrates that it is never too late to achieve our aspirations, and who teaches us that a resilient woman can accomplish anything she sets her heart upon." A chorus of toasts and applause ensued. A profound sense of pride welled within me, bringing tears to my eyes. It was the first occasion in my life that my accomplishments had received public acknowledgement. In the restaurant, when I orchestrated banquets for 200 guests, the commendation invariably went to the chef. My marriage to Robert, while a partnership with a good man, lacked verbal expressions of admiration. This moment of celebratory recognition was entirely novel. Manny and Lauren arrived an hour behind schedule, by which time the main course had been concluded and dessert was being served. They offered a perfunctory apology regarding traffic and occupied the seats I had reserved for them. their reserved demeanour starkly contrasting with the convivial atmosphere we had cultivated. Lauren greeted everyone with manufactured smiles and superficial pleasantries about the table's aesthetic, but I knew her well enough to detect her critical scrutiny of every detail. The way she touched the tablecloths as if assessing their quality, her examination of the plates for imperfections, her gaze at the garden flowers with an expression suggesting their commonality. Manny ate in silence, responding with monosyllabic utterances when queried about his profession or his children. The children, agitated from their car journey, roamed the house, touching everything without parental restraint. Tatiana, unfamiliar with Manny and Lauren, attempted to draw them into conversation. "You must be incredibly proud of Fatima. Not everyone possesses the resolve to save so diligently and purchase their own home at 65. Lauren offered a semblance of a smile, the kind she employed to project an amiable facade, yet her annoyance was palpable. Indeed, although we would have preferred she consulted us prior to making such a significant decision. At her age, living alone can pose risks. The comment landed like a lead weight amidst the festivities. Vincent, intimately aware of my self-reliance, having witnessed my repair endeavours firsthand, evinced a frown. "Pardon me, but Fatima is among the most independent individuals I know. She expends more energy than many half her age." Lauren straightened in her seat, perceiving Vincent's statement as a challenge. "Well, you are not privy to the entirety of the situation. We are family. We understand what is best for her." Joanna placed her fork on her plate with more force than necessary. "And what precisely do you deem best for her? That she reside in a location offering support, where she is not isolated in the event of an emergency. This house is situated rather remotely, in a neighbourhood that is not the most secure." Lillian, a woman of direct communication, possessing little patience for diplomatic circumlocution, interjected. "Forgive me, but Fatima appears perfectly capable of making her own determinations, and from my observation, this residence is in exemplary condition." Manny finally broke his silence, his words compounding the palpable tension. "The issue is, you all fail to grasp the complete picture. Mum has depleted her entire savings on this property, funds that could have ensured her future security. Should she fall ill or require specialized care, what will she utilize for payment?" "I have health insurance," I stated, feeling my elation dissipate like mist under a scorching sun. "And I am employed. I am not incapacitated." Lauren, however, had already found her rhythm. "Mum, please do not take offense, but you are no longer at an age where you should be lifting heavy cookware or standing for extended periods. One of these days, you are going to sustain an injury, and then what will become of us?" Vincent rose from the table, clearly discomfited by the conversation's trajectory. "Fatima, thank you immensely for the meal and your hospitality. Everything was delectable, but I believe it is time for me to depart." Tatiana also rose, but before leaving, she approached and whispered into my ear, "Cousin, do not permit anyone to seize what you have so arduously earned. This house is yours, and your life is yours." Joanna and Lillian departed shortly thereafter, but before exiting, Joanna squeezed my hand with conviction. "If you require anything, anything at all, you call me. You are not alone in this." Once Manny, Lauren, the children, and I were left alone, the atmosphere became heavy, akin to an impending storm. Lauren rose to clear the dishes without my prompting, her movements abrupt, betraying her ill humor. "Mum, we need to talk," Manny announced once the children had retreated to the yard to play. I settled onto my favorite sofa, the one acquired through a 3-month installment plan, and awaited their pronouncements. Lauren dried her hands and positioned herself before me, her arms crossed. "Mum, let us be candid. This situation cannot persist." "What situation?" "Your solitary existence. expending funds on a domicile exceeding your needs while we struggle financially? The core of their discontent was revealed. It was not my welfare or safety that concerned them, but rather my possession of something they desired but could not attain. Manny drew closer, perching on the arm of my chair, employing a physical proximity he knew made me uneasy to exert pressure. Mum, we've been discussing this, and what if we were to sell this house and purchase a larger one where we could all reside comfortably? You would have your own chamber, but you would have companionship, and we could assist with expenses and upkeep. The casual inclusion of we implied joint ownership of my home. I have no intention of selling my house, I stated, my voice as firm as I could muster. Lauren exhaled audibly. Mum, be practical. With the equity this property holds, combined with our contributions, we could secure a far superior residence in a more desirable and secure locale. This house is ideal for me, but not for us, Lauren murmured, her voice barely audible. That evening after their departure, I sat in my garden, reflecting on the events. My celebratory occasion had been marred by the avarice of the two individuals who should have professed the deepest affection. Yet I had also gained invaluable insight. I possessed true friends who respected my choices and valued my autonomy. The conflict, however, had just commenced. 3 weeks subsequent to the luncheon, Manny faced termination from his position at the insurance firm. This marked his third job loss within 2 years, invariably attributable to the same factors: tardiness, unsubstantiated absences, and an attitude deemed unprofessional by his employers. He, however, maintained that all his superiors had been unjust, his colleagues envious, and the universe conspired against him. The call arrived on a Tuesday evening, just as I returned from the restaurant, submerging my swollen feet in a soothing Epsom salt bath. Manny's voice on the phone was laced with desperation, reminiscent of a child who had broken a treasured possession and sought maternal intervention. Mum, I was fired from work today. My supervisor cited 3 instances of lateness this month, but it's utterly unfair. Traffic is insurmountable, and furthermore, my car is giving me trouble. And what is your plan now? I inquired, though I already anticipated the direction of our conversation. I don't know, Mum. I need to pay rent next week, and I have nothing. The children require school supplies, and Lauren insists that if we don't settle soon, we will be evicted from our apartment. A familiar knot formed in my stomach, a perplexing blend of guilt and resentment that invariably surfaced when Manny encountered financial difficulties. As a mother, my primal instinct was to shield and assist him, to resolve his predicaments. Yet as a woman who had toiled throughout her life to achieve financial stability, it rankled that at 35 years of age, he still anticipated me serving as his financial safety net. Manny, you must endeavour to secure alternative employment promptly. Numerous establishments are currently hiring. I know, Mum, but in the interim I require assistance. Might you lend me the funds for rent? It amounts to $800. I shall reimburse you the moment I secure employment. $800. Nearly 2 months' worth of my house maintenance expenditures. Funds I had arduously earned through a full week of relentless work at the restaurant. Commencing at 5 in the morning and concluding at 8 at night, my hands scalded and my back aching. Manny, I have already extended considerable financial aid to you this year. It is imperative that you learn to manage your expenditures. Mom, please, it is an emergency. Do you wish for my children to be cast into the streets? The familiar tactic of emotional manipulation, invariably effective. The maternal guilt, incapable of withstanding the notion of her grandchildren suffering due to their parents' shortcomings. However, this time ensconced in my own home, surrounded by the fruits of my own labour, something within me rebelled. Your children will not be cast into the streets. You will devise a solution to your predicament as the adult you are. A silence, several seconds in duration, ensued on the other end of the line. When Manny finally spoke, his tone was glacial and calculating, a cadence I had never before encountered. Very well, Mum, I comprehend. I now grasp your priorities. Your allegiance has shifted. What do you mean by that? Ever since you acquired that residence, you have become self-centered. Previously, you invariably aided us when the need arose, but now that you possess your little palace, you have neglected your family. The words struck like a stinging slap. Selfish for safeguarding the earnings of my labor. Selfish for realizing a dream that had eluded me for decades. Selfish for refusing to continue functioning as my adult children's personal ATM. I am not selfish, Manny. I am a woman who has dedicated her life to securing a modicum of stability in her twilight years. Mum, you are 67 years old. What possible need could you have for such substantial funds? Why the necessity for such an expansive dwelling? It would be far more prudent for you to reside with us and liquidate that property. With the proceeds, we could procure something more advantageous for everyone involved. The same offer, a proposal, they had been presenting since I acquired the residence, was now being pressed with heightened urgency due to their immediate need for funds. I have no intention of relinquishing ownership of my home, Manny, I stated firmly. But you are squandering your resources on frivolous expenditures. Yesterday, Lauren mentioned observing you purchasing new flora for the garden. What value do plants hold when your son remains unemployed? What indeed were plants worth? As if notions of aesthetic appeal, personal contentment, or the satisfaction of possessing something were devoid of merit. As if my earnings were solely designated to rectify the predicaments stemming from their poor judgments. My botanical acquisitions amounted to $10. Your lodging expenses are $800. These are incomparable sums. The discourse concluded with Manny abruptly terminating the call, an unprecedented action. I was left holding the receiver, the lingering hum of the dial tone a testament to the profound, irreversible shift that had occurred between us. 2 days hence they appeared unannounced at my doorstep on a Friday afternoon. I had just returned from my place of employment and was in the process of changing out of my work attire when a rapping sound echoed from the entryway. My initial thought was that it was Vincent, who occasionally dropped by to ascertain if I required any assistance. However, upon opening the door, I was met with the presence of Manny, Lauren, and their 2 offspring on my porch. A surprise, Lauren declared, her smile failing to reach her eyes. We've come for a visit. They entered without awaiting an invitation, the children making a beeline for the rear garden. Manny was carrying a modest satchel, and Lauren exuded an air of proprietorship that unsettled me. What is contained within that bag? I inquired. Well, Mama, Manny explained, given your reluctance to provide financial assistance, our landlord has granted us 3 days to vacate the premises. Therefore, we have opted to reside with you while we search for more economical accommodations. My heart lurched to share my home, the sanctuary I had labored so diligently to secure. Absolutely not, I responded without hesitation. You cannot remain here. Lauren casually took a seat on my sofa as if my refusal had gone unheard. And why not? You possess 2 bedrooms and we are family. It is the least you can do after declining to assist us. Because this is my dwelling, and I dictate who inhabits it. Manny placed the bag on the floor and regarded me with that semblance of profound disappointment he had employed to manipulate me since his adolescent years. Mum, are you truly contemplating leaving us to face destitution? Your own grandchildren? I am not abandoning you to the elements. You have made choices that have led you to this predicament. You can seek alternative housing. You can solicit aid from Lauren's family. There are 1,000 avenues you could pursue before encroaching upon my personal space. Lauren rose from the sofa with a theatrical gesture. Encroaching upon your space. Consider her words, dictating terms to her own kin. We who have consistently provided for her, who have always been present for her. When precisely have you provided for me? When have you been present for me? I am the one who has invariably extended aid to you. Oh, Mamma, refrain from exaggeration. Do you not recall when you were afflicted with the influenza last year and Manny procured your medication? On a single occasion within the span of 12 years as a widow, Manny had indeed ventured to the pharmacy on my behalf when I was experiencing a high fever, an event I remembered due to its sheer extraordinariness. That single instance does not justify your appropriation of my residence. Manny approached me with that patronizing smirk I detested. Mum, cease the dramatics. We are not appropriating anything. We merely require temporary lodging for a few weeks as we secure a more permanent solution. A few weeks that I foresaw stretching into months, and months into years. I understood them intimately. Once established within my abode, their departure would be an insurmountable challenge. They would invariably initiate discussions regarding shared expenses, modifications to accommodate the collective household, and the inherent convenience of cohabitation. My answer remains no. You will not spend a single night under this roof. Lauren shifted her approach from entreaty to direct confrontation. Very well, Mamma. We now grasp your true nature. However, do not forget that when your elder years arrive and you require assistance, you will recall this very moment. Are you issuing a threat? I am stating a truth. Family is meant to support one another, yet your sole focus is on your own welfare. To prioritize my own well-being as if it were a transgression after 67 years of placing others first. Initially my parents, then Robert, subsequently Manny, and now finally myself. They departed that evening, but not before Lauren delivered a parting remark that sent a shiver down my spine. Mamma, this dwelling is far too capacious for your solitary occupancy, and the neighborhood is not entirely secure. At some point you will require an attendant, and I trust we shall possess the magnanimity to provide it, given your current demeanor towards us. That night, sleep eluded me, not due to remorse, but rather apprehension. For the first time since acquiring my home, I perceived my sanctuary as being imperiled. I knew Manny and Lauren sufficiently well to recognize that they would not relinquish their objective easily. If tears failed to secure my financial assets, they would resort to pressure. If words proved insufficient to sway me, they would devise alternative strategies. I rose multiple times to confirm that all portals were secured. The conflict had officially commenced. The initial indication of an impending issue was the sound of keys engaging my lock on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen preparing my morning coffee when I discerned that familiar metallic jingle, followed by the unmistakable sound of my front door creaking open. This was, however, inexplicable. I was in sole possession of the keys to my residence. Emerging from the kitchen, coffee cup in hand, I anticipated encountering a neighbor in distress, or perhaps Vincent, who might have arrived to investigate a perceived concern. Instead, I found Manny standing in my living area, a smile gracing his features as if his presence were entirely his prerogative. Good morning, Mum. I arrived early to converse with you. How did you gain entry? My voice emerged with an uncharacteristic pitch. Oh, Lauren had a duplicate of your keys fashioned during our recent visit. She suggested it was a prudent measure for safety in the event of an unforeseen circumstance necessitating our entry. I stood immobile, the ceramic vessel trembling in my grasp. My privacy had been fundamentally violated. My keys, and by extension my consent, had been usurped. A copy had been produced without my consultation, and they were now ingress into my domicile as though it were their own. "Return those keys to me this instant." Manny settled himself on my sofa, arms crossed, regarding me with that affectation of extreme patience he reserved for occasions when he deemed my reactions unreasonable. "Mum, cease your agitation. The keys are for your own protection. Imagine if you were to fall and be unable to reach the door, if you experienced a medical emergency. I require no other individual to possess keys to my domicile. This is my private property." "Precisely, and that is what I wish to discuss. Lauren and I have been contemplating, and we believe it is opportune to implement certain modifications here." "What manner of modifications?" Manny arose and commenced an inspection of the living space, as though evaluating a prospective acquisition. "This dwelling exhibits considerable potential, yet it necessitates modernization. The guest chamber could be repurposed as quarters for the children. The living area is of sufficient magnitude to be segmented, creating a recreational zone. And your bedroom? Well, it is rather expansive for an individual." My bedroom, the personal sanctuary I had meticulously cultivated, adorned with my floral draperies, my delicate wall coverings, my ideal vantage point for observing the dawn. "You will not touch my bedroom. Mom, be rational. There are 4 of us and only one of you. It is logical that space allocation should be determined by the needs of each family unit. Each family unit, as if he and I were distinct entities with equivalent claims to my property. This dialogue has concluded, Manny. I expect you to depart my residence immediately." Rather than rising, he reclined further into the sofa's embrace. "Mum, I am not departing. Lauren and the children will arrive within the hour, accompanied by some of our belongings. We have resolved that we shall reside here whilst we seek more suitable and expansive accommodations for everyone. I shall contact the authorities." Manny emitted a laugh devoid of mirth. It was the chuckle of someone privy to information I lacked. "And what precisely will you articulate to them? That your son has come to visit his mother at her home. I possess keys, I share a familial connection with you, and I am committing no illegal act. You entered without my sanction." "I possess keys. That implies consent." I comprehended the meticulous nature of his planning. This was not an impulsive act driven by desperation, but rather a calculated strategy to assume control of my residence through means that would prove legally intractable. By the time Lauren arrived with the children and 3 considerable valises, I had already alerted the constabulary. However, Manny's assessment proved accurate. Their intervention was largely nominal. The officer on duty, a young man who appeared ill at ease with the situation, elucidated that disputes concerning familial property were inherently complex. "Madam," he stated, "I comprehend your frustration, but your son possesses keys to the dwelling and asserts your consent for their occupancy. Unless you can provide documentation to the contrary, this is classified as a civil matter, not a criminal one." Documentation. What documentation could possibly exist? Who would conceive of the necessity for a written accord to preclude their own relatives from invading their home? Lauren had already established herself in my kitchen, preparing sustenance as if she were the rightful proprietor. The children were careening throughout the house, disturbing my possessions, rearranging my furnishings, treating my personal space as if it were a recreational park. Manny had introduced his substantial television set into the living room and was in the process of connecting it, without soliciting my permission to displace my modest television. That inaugural night, I slept with my bedroom door secured, discerning unfamiliar sounds emanating from within my own domicile, hushed conversations in the living area, the cadence of footsteps in the hallway, the persistent murmur of the television late into the night. My sanctuary had been transformed into a guest house, and I was the sole occupant who had not elected to be present. On the subsequent day, I returned from my employment to find that all my living room furnishings had been relocated. My cherished sofa was relegated to a corner by the window. My coffee table had been supplanted by a more substantial unit that they had introduced, and my plants had been transferred to the rear garden to create additional space. By the third day, Lauren had undertaken a complete reorganization of my kitchen. My cookware was now housed in cupboards beyond my easy reach, necessitating a climb onto a chair. My collection of spices had been replaced by more expensive varieties of her preference. My coffee maker had vanished, superseded by an elaborate espresso machine whose operation was beyond my comprehension. On the fourth day, I discovered painters within my bedroom. Upon my arrival and observation of these individuals covering my delicately hued walls with stark white paint, a profound breaking point was reached within me. It was not merely the paint itself, but the sheer audacity of their presumption to alter my most intimate space without the courtesy of consultation. Manny offered an explanation as if his actions were entirely reasonable. "Mom, we've determined this room is excessively large for you. The children require more space, and furthermore, this shall serve as the primary bedroom of the residence. You can occupy the smaller chamber, which is more fitting for your requirements." The smaller chamber was what they had designated the guest room. It lacked the expansive window I so adored. It did not possess the commodious wardrobe where I stored my attire. It did not offer the convenient access to the main bathroom that streamlined my mornings when I was pressed for time to reach my workplace. Lauren entered, a triumphant smile adorning her countenance. "Mama, you will witness what a splendid transformation this represents. This white hue will imbue the room with a greater sense of spaciousness and modernity, and we have already commissioned new furnishings, an entire bedroom suite that will possess an astonishing aesthetic." "With what funds did you procure these furnishings?" Manny exchanged a significant glance with Lauren before responding. "Well, given that we are all residing here collectively, we deemed it logical to allocate a portion of your savings towards improvements that would benefit the entire family." My savings. They had discovered my financial reserves. Somehow, during those 4 days, they had ascertained the location of my emergency funds and had concluded that it constituted familial capital. "How much did you take?" "Merely $2,000 for the bedroom furnishings and certain enhancements to the dwelling. Do not be concerned, it represents an investment. Upon the sale of the house, its value will be considerably augmented." When we sell the house, the question was no longer whether they would sell the house, but when. That evening, following the humiliation of encountering painters in my bedroom, the discovery of the misappropriation of my funds, and the observation of how they had converted my home into their personal undertaking, I arrived at a decision. I would not permit this course of events to continue. I seated myself in the chamber they had designated as my new quarters and retrieved my mobile device. Initially, I contacted Vincent to solicit the name of the legal counsel he had engaged during his property acquisition. Subsequently, I contacted the bank to report unauthorized access to my accounts. Finally, I consulted the directory for the number of a locksmith offering 24-hour emergency services. If they desired a confrontation, they would certainly receive one. However, they had underestimated my resilience. A woman who had dedicated decades to culinary environments where men assumed they could intimidate her, where vociferous supervisors believed they could trample upon her dignity, where each day presented a struggle to uphold self-respect and honor. A woman who had learned that sometimes it is imperative to assert one's rights, irrespective of whether the adversary is of one's own blood. The white paint was dripping onto my polished dresser, yet the sight no longer caused me distress. It served as tangible evidence, a testament to the lengths to which they would resort to pilfer that which had demanded such considerable effort to obtain. Tomorrow I would demonstrate that Fatima Jones had been gravely underestimated. That night, I waited until the entire household had fallen silent. I listened as Manny and Lauren ceased their hushed conversations in what they now considered their master suite. I waited until the children had succumbed to slumber in the living room, where inflatable mattresses had been deployed. When the only sound audible was the rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock, I emerged from my modest chamber, shoes in hand. Over the preceding 4 nights, I had meticulously observed and documented every alteration made without my consent, every misplaced item, every decision executed as if they held proprietary rights. I had captured photographic evidence with my older mobile device, images that depicted my possessions shoved into a corner, my flora discarded in the yard, the freshly applied paint obscuring my cherished walls. I exited the dwelling through the rear portal, the one that granted access to the garden where I had so lovingly planted my flowers. The locksmith had informed me of his impending arrival at 5 in the morning, precisely 1 hour before my departure for work. All arrangements had to be finalized prior to Manny and Lauren's awakening. Precisely at 5 o'clock, an elderly gentleman arrived in a diminutive truck, his presence heralded by no audible disturbance. Vincent had recommended his brother-in-law, Mark, a man of considerable trustworthiness who was adept at navigating delicate situations. I conveyed the circumstances to him as he examined my door mechanisms. "Ma'am Fatima," he stated, "this is a more prevalent occurrence than one might imagine. Families who prey upon elderly individuals, presuming their inability to defend themselves, but you are taking the appropriate course of action." Mark worked with remarkable speed and silence. He replaced the lock on the front door, the mechanism on the garden gate, and even installed a new bolt on the rear entrance. He provided me with 3 sets of new keys. One for my personal use, a spare to be concealed in a safety deposit box entrusted to Vincent's care, and an additional set to be carried in my work bag. Upon Mark's departure, I proceeded to my place of employment as if it were a typical day. However, throughout my entire shift at the restaurant, my heart throbbed with such intensity that I surmised it must be audible to everyone. I was aware that within a few hours, Manny and Lauren would discover their inability to access my residence. The anticipated moment arrived at 2 in the afternoon. I was meticulously preparing vegetables for the evening service when my mobile device began to ring. It was Manny. I allowed it to ring until it ceased. It rang immediately thereafter. This time it was Lauren. I did not answer either call. Text messages commenced to arrive in rapid succession. "Mum, why have you altered the locks?" "Mama, this is utterly absurd. Open the door." "Mum, all of our possessions are within. The children require their toys. This constitutes abduction. We shall contact the authorities." The chef, noticing my apparent distraction, inquired about my well-being. I explained that I was experiencing some familial difficulties, but assured him of my continued capacity to work. It was imperative to maintain my routine, to project the image of the same dependable, diligent Fatimi I had always been. At 3:30, a message arrived that elicited a smile, the first in days. "The police have indicated that as it is your property, you are at liberty to change the locks at your discretion." Excellent! All was proceeding according to my strategic design. Upon my arrival home that afternoon, I found the entire family congregated on my front porch. The children were engrossed in their electronic tablets. Manny was pacing, engaged in a telephone conversation, and Lauren regarded me with a gaze of such profound animosity that it seemed capable of igniting my garden. "Mom, open that door this instant!" Manny vociferated the moment he perceived me. "No!" "What do you mean, no? Our belongings are situated inside." "Your belongings should not be situated inside. I have never granted you permission to occupy my residence." Lauren rose from the step where she had been seated, hands on her hips. assuming the posture of an indignant sovereign. Mama, this has escalated beyond the realm of reason. We are family. You cannot abandon us to the streets. I am not abandoning you to the streets. I am expelling you from my home. What is the fundamental distinction? Manny advanced towards me, adopting that intimidating demeanor he had honed over the years. Mum, you are undertaking a gravely serious action. We are referring to your grandchildren. Are you truly contemplating rendering them homeless? Your grandchildren have parents who bear the responsibility of providing them with a home. I am not accountable for the imprudent decisions you two have made. For the first time in my acquaintance with them, Manny and Lauren were rendered speechless. For years they had employed emotional manipulation to achieve their objectives from me. However, they now recognized that this tactic had lost its efficacy. Vincent arrived in his truck at the precise opportune moment. I had conferred with him that morning, requesting his presence not only for moral support, but also to serve as a witness to the unfolding events. Good afternoon, Fatima. Is everything satisfactory here? His presence immediately altered the prevailing dynamic. Manny and Lauren were disinclined to assume the role of proprietors in the presence of an external observer. Lauren attempted to enlist Vincent's sympathy. Oh, Mr. Vincent, I do hope you can intercede with my mother-in-law. She has been exhibiting rather peculiar behavior since acquiring this residence. She has unceremoniously ejected us from the premises and now refuses to grant us entry. Vincent directed a subtle smile towards me. Ma'am Fatima, did these young individuals have a lease agreement with you? No, I never granted them permission to reside here. Then I perceive no issue. This is your property, and you dictate who inhabits it. Manny exhibited increasing signs of desperation. His carefully orchestrated plan to gradually annex my residence was disintegrating, and he seemed at a loss to regain control. Mr. Vincent, you do not fully comprehend the circumstances. My mother is alone. At her age, she should not be without familial proximity. We simply wish to care for her. Vincent, who had encountered independent elderly individuals throughout his life, including his own mother, who lived independently until she reached the age of 85, remained unconvinced. Young man, your mother appears perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. She dedicates more hours to her work than many individuals, half her age. However, at that precise juncture, the surprise I had anticipated throughout the entire day materialized. A police cruiser parked in front of my residence, and the same young officer who had attended the scene a few days prior upon my initial call emerged from the vehicle. Officer, thank you for your prompt arrival, I stated, approaching him. Mrs. Jones, we received a report of a domestic disturbance. Could you clarify the situation? Before I could respond, Lauren hurried towards the police officer as if he were her personal rescuer. Officer, my mother-in-law has inexplicably expelled us from her home. We have young children and all of our possessions are within. The officer regarded me with a look of inquiry. Madam, is it accurate that these individuals were residing in your home? Yes, but without my authorization. They duplicated my keys without my consent. They took up residence without my approval, and they commenced making alterations to my property without my agreement. The officer retrieved his notepad and began to make entries. Was there any rental agreement? Any written contract? An accord was absent because I had never granted them authorization to reside here. Manny interjected, his voice laced with desperation. Officer, she is my mother. She cannot simply evict us in this manner. It is inhumane. The officer, accustomed to such predicaments, exhaled with weary patience. Sir, the fact that she is your mother does not automatically grant you rights to her property. If she is the legal owner of the residence and no lease agreement exists, she has the prerogative to determine who occupies it. But our belongings are inside, Lauren protested. Your possessions can be retrieved under supervision, I explained to the officer. I have no objection to that. My sole desire is for them not to return to live here. The officer nodded. That seems a reasonable proposition, Mrs. Jones. Would you permit them access to collect their items, with me overseeing the process? Certainly. And so, an hour later, I observed as they removed every item they had brought to commandeer my living space. The new furnishings they had procured with my funds, the sizable television, the luggage filled with apparel, the children's playthings, all exited through the very portal by which they had entered without my consent. Upon completion, Lauren regarded me with a gaze a mixture of animosity and despair. Mother, you will come to regret this. When you are elderly and solitary, you will recall how you treated us. I am already elderly, Lauren, and I find solitude preferable to being in questionable company. Manny made one final attempt at emotional leverage. Mum, are you truly choosing a house over your family? I am not choosing a house over my family. I am choosing my dignity over mistreatment. They departed that evening, yet I was certain this conflict was far from over. I knew Manny and Lauren sufficiently well to anticipate their pursuit of an alternative avenue to achieve their objectives. My intuition proved accurate. Retribution was scheduled for the dawn. The ensuing morning commenced with the very clamour I had most dreaded, a forceful pounding on my front door. It was precisely 6:30. I was in the process of dressing for work when I heard authoritative voices beyond the threshold. Police, open the door, please. My heart seized. It was not the younger officer from the previous day. These were different voices, more sombre, more official. I donned a robe over my restaurant uniform and opened the door, my hands trembling. 2 officers presented me with a search warrant. Mrs. Jones, we are in possession of a search warrant. We have received reports alleging you are unlawfully retaining possessions that do not belong to you. What possessions? The officers entered without awaiting further clarification. One of them carried a meticulously detailed list on a sheet of paper. According to the complaint, you are currently harbouring furniture, cash, and significant documents that belong to Manny Jones and Lauren Smith. Trailing the officers were Manny and Lauren, their expressions of triumph thinly veiled. Lauren clutched a folder brimming with papers as if she had meticulously prepared for this moment for weeks. Officer, I explained to your colleague yesterday that they moved into my residence without my permission. I possess nothing that belongs to them. Manny approached the lead officer, adopting the practiced demeanour of a wronged individual. Officer, my mother is disoriented. She requested we live with her, citing a loneliness and a fear of living alone. We brought our furnishings, our clothing, and even contributed funds towards home improvements. That is a falsehood, I stated immediately. Lauren unfurled her folder and extracted several documents. Officer, here are the receipts for the furniture we purchased for this dwelling. I also possess text messages in which my mother-in-law invited us to reside with her. My blood ran cold. Text messages I had never dispatched, receipts for furniture they had acquired with my pilfered funds. They had fabricated fraudulent evidence to corroborate their fabricated narrative. The officer examined the documents Lauren had provided. Mrs. Jones, these messages appear to originate from your telephone number. In one, you explicitly state, Manny, come live with me. This house is too large for me alone. I never sent those messages. I have no knowledge of how they were fabricated, but I did not compose them. Manny intervened, his voice tinged with sorrow and concern. Officer, my mother has been exhibiting peculiar behaviour recently. She experiences memory lapses. She denies actions she has indeed performed. We are apprehensive about her mental well-being. Mental well-being? There it was, the new strategy. If financial avenues proved fruitless, they intended to have me declared mentally incapacitated. Officer, I am employed full-time at a restaurant, dedicating 40 hours per week. I manage my own finances. I settle my accounts. I maintain my household. There is absolutely nothing amiss with my mental state. But Lauren was already prepared with her counter-argument. Mother, the other day you neglected to recall inviting us for dinner, and last week you contacted Manny 3 times to inquire about the same matter. These are undeniable indicators of early onset dementia. More fabrications. Every utterance from her lips was a calculated deception designed to portray me as a bewildered elderly woman incapable of independent decision-making. The lead officer regarded me with a complex expression of sympathy and suspicion. Mrs. Jones, do you possess any documentation verifying this residence as exclusively yours? Naturally, it is in my bedroom. As I moved to retrieve the property deeds, I overheard Manny conversing in a low tone with the officers. She has been exceedingly paranoid lately. She claims we intend to rob her, that we are plotting against her. It is characteristic of individuals with senile dementia. I returned with the house deed, my identification and all documentation substantiating my sole ownership of the property. The officer meticulously reviewed them. These documents are in order. The house is registered solely in your name. Yet Lauren remained undeterred. Officer, that does not alter the fact that she invited us to reside here and that we made financial contributions. We possess tenant rights, even in the absence of a written contract. At that precise moment, my telephone rang. It was Vincent. I answered promptly, briefly outlining the situation. He assured me he would arrive within 5 minutes, accompanied by the legal counsel he had recommended. Officer, my legal representative is en route. We can defer proceedings until his arrival. The officer inclined his head, but Manny became visibly agitated. We need not await any attorney. This is a straightforward family matter. Upon Vincent's arrival with attorney Michael Jenkins, the entire dynamic underwent a palpable shift. The lawyer, a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, immediately requested to examine all evidence presented by Lauren. Officer, may I review this purported evidence? Attorney Jenkins scrutinized the text messages through a magnifying glass produced from his briefcase. After several moments, he looked up, a faint smile gracing his lips. These messages are fraudulent. It is clearly discernible from the metadata. They were generated utilizing an application designed for the creation of fabricated conversations. The lead officer's brow furrowed. Are you certain? Completely certain. Furthermore, officer, submitting false evidence to the authorities constitutes a federal offense. These individuals could face charges for obstruction of justice. Lauren's complexion instantly drained of color. I wasn't aware. Someone else must have. Do not complete that sentence, the lawyer cautioned her. Anything you state can and will be used against you. Manny attempted one final desperate maneuver. Officer, regardless of what these documents indicate, my mother requires assistance. She cannot live independently at her age. Attorney Jenkins addressed Manny directly, his voice firm. Young man, your mother is a competent adult, possessing the right to make her own determinations regarding her domicile and lifestyle. The mere fact that you disapprove of those choices does not grant you license to fabricate fraudulent evidence or trespass upon her property. The lead officer closed his notebook and addressed Manny and Lauren. Based on the information presented, you hold no legal claim to this property. The text messages are falsified. There is no valid tenancy agreement, and Mrs. Jones is demonstrably capable of making her own decisions. But, officer, Lauren protested. Madam, should you persist in harassing Mrs. Jones or attempting to gain unauthorized entry to her property, you will be subject to charges of trespassing. Is that understood? Manny and Lauren departed my residence that morning, defeated and visibly humiliated. However, before exiting, Manny met my gaze with a chilling coldness I had never before witnessed. "Mother, you have triumphed in this encounter, but you are now entirely alone, utterly solitary." His words were crafted to inflict pain, to engender guilt over my decision to prioritize my dignity above their manipulation. Yet for the first time in my existence, solitude did not instill fear. "I am not alone, Manny. I have genuine companions, a fulfilling occupation, and a home that is unequivocally mine. I possess my self-respect, which I nearly forfeited attempting to appease the two of you." Following their departure, Attorney Jenkins elucidated my legal recourse. I could initiate proceedings against them for the fabricated messages, for the funds they had absconded with from my savings, and for their intrusion onto my property. I opted against this, but I instructed him to prepare a restraining order to preclude them from approaching my domicile. That afternoon, upon returning from work, I found my house precisely as I had left it, in a state of tranquil silence, entirely my own. I settled in my garden with a cup of coffee, gazing at the blossoms I had personally cultivated, inhaling the air of my own sanctuary. For the first instance in months, I harbored no apprehension of an uninvited intrusion. I was no longer subjected to criticism regarding my choices. I was not compelled to justify my expenditures or my aspirations. Joanna visited that evening. She joined me in the garden and inquired about my feelings. "Free," I responded. "For the first time in my life, I feel entirely liberated." I gleaned a profound lesson from these months of struggle. Occasionally, electing personal happiness necessitates disappointing cherished individuals. At times, asserting one's dignity requires severing ties with family who perceive you as a resource rather than an individual. Seldom is chosen solitude less preferable than a detrimental association. I continue my employment at the restaurant. I continue to tend my garden. I continue to reside in my modest yet perfect dwelling. Manny and Lauren have ceased all contact, and that is acceptable. Perhaps one day, once they have learned to respect me as the autonomous individual I am, a relationship can be re-established. However, it will be contingent upon my terms, not theirs. In the interim, I am 67 years of age. I own my home, I am surrounded by true friends, and I experience the serenity that accompanies the assurance that no one can divest me of what I diligently acquired. Sometimes silence is the most potent form of justice. Did you find my narrative compelling? And from which city are you observing? Let us connect in the comments section. If you enjoyed the story, your support through a super thanks would be greatly appreciated, enabling me to continue delivering similar narratives. My sincere gratitude for your benevolent support. I eagerly anticipate your reflections on the story. On the screen, you will find 2 additional life narratives that I highly recommend. My channel offers a wealth of further content. Please consider subscribing. Until our next life story, with affection and esteem.